How often should you water your plants? When is the best time to water your plants? How much water do plants need? Watering container plants. When to water your plants? Let us make one of our garden resolution this year to not overwater our plants or underwater it just the same. Welcome and welcome back to another Gardening with Stacey. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate you one and all.
Come garden with me now, man.
What a nice place to live. Sweet jam.
When is the best time to water your plants? So the very best time to water your plants, in my opinion, is in the early morning. So that way the plants will get enough time to absorb the water and it will keep them throughout the entire day. Especially if you have a climate like mine here in the tropics. So the second best time is in the evening. And at this time you don't want to, well, I try not to get my leaves wet when I water in the evening. I water the soil directly because the leaves may not get enough time to dry out properly, and if they don't dry out properly, then what? They're going to get that powdery mildew, right? And you want to avoid that. No. Night watering, some people do night watering, but it is not ideal because your leaves will not dry off quickly enough, and so you'll definitely get that powdery mildew on your plants. And usually it's when your plants are wet that they are more prone to disease. I personally don't recommend it, but some people do it. Alright, so I guess once you know what you're doing, like if you're aiming for the soil itself and not the foliage, then do what you have to. Alright, so midday watering, I do not recommend it. But there are times when you may have to do it, depending on where you live, depending on your growing conditions. You may have to do it, but the reason why I don't recommend it is because evaporation takes place excessively, right? So it's not too efficient for you to water at that time during the heat of the day. But what if you went away and you came back in the heat of the day, your plants are wilted and they're just stressed out? What would you do? Would you water or not? Comment below and tell me. So how much water your plant needs? Well, that depends on so many factors. One is the type of plant. For example, like a tomato plant will need more water than a garlic, right? So it all depends on the plant. So you can do a little research. I mean, Google is there for everyone. You can take a peep if you're not sure and if you need to know more. Alright? The weather. Of course, in winter, the plants need less water than in summer. Because definitely in summer, the plants will dry out more quickly because it is very hot. In winter, it is much more cooler. And that is where things like mulching comes in, right? So you know, when you mulch, it helps to retain moisture in the soil. So imagine that I have mulch in my containers now in winter. Sometimes I don't water for a day or two, it all depends. Especially if I have some type of rainfall, because I have the mulch that is helping me to retain moisture. Now in summer, in my experience with my climate, even though I use the mulch, what it does for me in summer is keep the plants throughout the day. By the evening, I still have to water because it dries out. So you'll find that without the mulch, by midday, they are wilted and they are stressed out by that time. So the mulch in the summer helps me until I get around to the evening, where I can come. So I water in the morning and I still water in the evening during the summer months. So for instance, today I water in the morning, I won't water in the evening, and I may not need to water tomorrow either if the day turns out to be very cool. Alright, so the next thing is the soil. If you have a light sandy soil, then you'll need to water more versus a heavy clay soil. The heavy clay soil will keep the water in longer than the light sandy soil. Alright, another thing to consider is the pot size. The smaller pots, without a doubt, will need less water than a bigger pot. So that is another thing to consider. So there are so many things. There are no hard and fast rules. So as you go, you have to consider all of those. Alright, and see what works for you, right? So what may work for me may not work for you, and vice versa. And that's just how it is. Now, the soil moisture. Persons would stick their finger in the soil and to see if the soil is moist or not. Now, if your soil is moist, you don't need to water. Consider those when trying to decide how much water your plants need. Based on what I shared with you, you can also use it as a basis to do a little more intense research. Alright, so watering container plants. I've gardened in raised beds, containers, and in-ground, right? And of course, containers dries out a lot faster than raised beds and in-ground.
It also heavily depends on your climate because pots will sometimes absorb heat. Some people will use their finger to test the soil to see if it is moist or if it dries out. Well, I used to do the same thing when I had just a few containers. I don't anymore because that would be efficient for me right now, seeing the amount of containers I have. And over time, after developing some experience, I can just look at my plants and soil and tell you that they need watering or not. So if for now you have to use your finger to test the soil, go ahead and do it until you're better able to tell. You get to the point over time where you will be able to just look and tell
when to water your plants.
Once your soil is dried out, then you know definitely you need to water. If you see your leaves, your plant leaves wilting away, you definitely need to water. Sometimes the tomatoes, for example, when you see them curling under, it's because they're not getting water consistently. And based on your watering schedule, if you have one, then you can definitely tell. Based on your climate, you can definitely tell when to water. If it rains, which you have no control over, then you know you're not going to water because that would be excessive watering. So overwatering will cause root rot. Some plants may need watering every day, some every few days, some once or twice a week. It all depends again on your climate and the time of year. So there is no hard and fast rule as to how often to water your plants either. Living in the tropics, especially where I am from, in the summer I water twice. I think I mentioned that earlier. So in spring I can say maybe every other day, and in fall and winter sometimes maybe 1.5 to 2 days. Of course, during the rainy period I water none at all because there's no need to. Some plants like thyme and rosemary can be watered like once per week, like for now, for example, in winter. So I basically just wait until the soil dries out completely, then I water them because they love the drought-like conditions. If the plants are newly planted, you know that you'll follow up with watering to ensure that they stay moist to develop their roots properly. You need to consider whether it's containers, raised beds, or in-ground, the type of soil, the climate, the time of year, wilting, dry soil, leaves turning yellow, curling under, or leaves turning brown, things like those.
No, I have these bonus must know watering tips.
Disease on your plants spreads more quickly in wet conditions, right? You cannot help when it rains, but you can minimize some of these diseases by keeping your leaves as dry as possible when you water. Well, for me, sometimes in the early mornings I may spray my plants with water. Really and truly, it's because they have the entire day, really. And sometimes I just feel as though my plant needs it. I don't know, I get that sense of feeling sometimes. You ever feel like you want to go to a river? Yeah, sometimes I come out and I say, alright, let me just spray my plants a little. You know, cool them down. Well, not necessarily cool them down because it's early morning. But the absolute best way to give your plants a drink is to put water on the soil near the base of the plant with a hose or a watering can. Well, sometimes for me, I dump the water on the plants from above because at that time I know that they will dry out properly by evening. Definitely use mulch if you can because it will slow down the evaporation process so your soil will stay moist longer. So like putting a 2-inch layer of mulch on top of your soil will definitely not just help your plants, it helps you as well because that's less watering for you. If it is possible for you to install a drip irrigation system, then kudos to you and definitely go for it. If you realize that your plants are looking wilted, then you know that they're under stress. Please rescue them, water them at that point in time. So for instance, if you're seeing it in the evening, like when you get home from work, don't bother wait till in the morning, do it right away. Alright? And but keep the leaves as dry as possible. And try not to let your plants get to that stage again where it wilt that much, because repeated wilting can weaken or damage your plant, making them less able to withstand the heat and pests. So you don't want to overwater your plants. I mentioned it before, but I'm saying it again. Do not overwater your plants. Alright, you don't want to suppress the breathing here of your roots, because if they don't get a chance to breathe properly, then you're going to have root rots, which will lead to plants dying. So if you use a sprinkler or you use the hose to spray, and then you see later down you see your plants wilting, that's simply because the roots did not get enough water. So it's best to take the time out and to properly water your plants in the mornings if you can. Give them a good soak to last them throughout the heat of the day. So you want to ensure that the water reaches the root. Alright? And what I generally practice is wait, water, wait. Sometimes, well, most of the times I do it. I water and I let that water seep through properly, and then I water again to make sure that my plants are properly watered. Not every time you water, you have to water every single container, because some of them dries out quicker than some. Remember, some are in some areas that are a lot cooler than some, and some are in the other areas that get direct sunlight. For those that get direct sunlight, they definitely will dry out quicker. Alright, so you have to consider that as well. Alright, so those are the bonus must know watering tips.
I'll leave you here for today. Thank you so much for watching.
Until next time, walk